Jenna, this might be one of the shortest modules in FAR, but I don't trust it.
I knew you'd start there.
Because short modules can be dangerous. They lure you into thinking, I'll just memorize a couple definitions. Then the exam gives you 4 events after year end, and asks which ones change the financial statements, which ones only get disclosed, and which ones do absolutely nothing.
Exactly. This entire module can be reduced to one question. Did the event tell us something about conditions that already existed on the balance sheet date? Everything else branches from that.
That's the mental model I wish someone had taught me first. Imagine you're a detective arriving after the crime has happened. You're gathering evidence. Some evidence tells you what was already true on December 31st. Other evidence tells you something entirely new happened in January. Those are completely different situations.
Perfect analogy. The financial statements are trying to tell the truth about the balance sheet date, not every interesting thing that happens afterward. So when something occurs after year end, we ask one simple question. Did this event reveal additional information about a condition that already existed? If the answer is yes, it's generally a recognized subsequent event. If the answer is no, it may still be important enough to disclose, but it does not change the reported numbers.
Notice what we're not asking. We're not asking whether the event is huge. We're not asking whether investors care. We're asking whether it changes our understanding of December 31st.
Exactly. Think of recognized subsequent events as getting a better picture of the past. Think of non-recognized subsequent events as learning about the future. The financial statements only adjust for the first category.
Let's talk about recognized events. The textbook gives several classic examples. The first one is litigation.
Suppose a lawsuit already existed at year-end. Then, before the financial statements are issued, the lawsuit settles. That settlement gives us better evidence about the obligation that already existed on the balance sheet date. So the financial statement should be adjusted to reflect that settlement amount.
The lawsuit didn't magically appear in January. The lawsuit already existed. January simply answered the question everyone had been estimating. That's why we adjust.
Exactly. Here's another favorite, customer bankruptcy.
This one trips people up. If the customer goes bankrupt shortly after year-end because financial problems already existed before year-end, then the bankruptcy provides evidence that the receivable was already impaired.
Which means the receivable should be adjusted. Again, we're learning something about the condition that existed on the balance sheet date. The bankruptcy didn't necessarily create the problem. It revealed it.
That's a really important distinction. The bankruptcy is like finally opening a sealed envelope. The bad news existed before you opened it. You just didn't know it yet.
Exactly. Now let's switch to non-recognized subsequent events. These involve conditions that did not exist on the balance sheet date. They happened afterward, so they don't change the numbers already reported.
The textbook gives several examples. Business combinations.
Suppose your company acquires another business in February after a December 31st year-end. That's obviously important. Investors probably want to know, but it didn't exist on December 31st. So you don't adjust the balance sheet. You disclose it if necessary.
Same idea with issuing stock after year-end. Important? Absolutely. Evidence about December 31st. No. Disclosure instead of adjustment.
The textbook also lists casualty losses occurring after year-end. Suppose a factory burns down in January. That doesn't mean the building was impaired on December 31st. The fire created a new condition, so no adjustment. Potential disclosure if it's material.
I like thinking about this as 2 movie cameras. One camera is pointed backward. One is pointed forward. Recognized events improve the replay. Non-recognized events are the sequel. Interesting, but they're not part of the first movie.
That's a really useful analogy. Just remember where it breaks down. Sometimes the later event looks dramatic enough that students instinctively want to change the financial statements. Don't let size fool you. A massive event can still be disclosure only if it represents a new condition.
That's exactly how exam writers think. They're hoping you'll confuse importance with adjustment. Those are different questions.
Now let's talk about the evaluation period, because you can't evaluate subsequent events forever. Eventually, you stop looking.
Makes sense. Otherwise, companies would still be updating last year's financial statements today.
Exactly. The textbook separates entities into two categories. SEC filers evaluate subsequent events through the date the financial statements are issued. Other entities evaluate through the date the financial statements are available to be issued.
The wording is incredibly similar. Issued. Available to be issued. Easy to mix up.
Which is why it's worth slowing down. The accounting analysis continues until the applicable cutoff date. After that point, later events generally are not considered subsequent events for purposes of these financial statements.
I like to imagine the accounting team closing the door. Once the reporting window closes, new information belongs to the next reporting period unless another rule says otherwise.
That's a good way to picture it. Now let's discuss reissued financial statements, because this sounds like it might reopen everything. It doesn't.
I actually assumed it did. If we're reissuing them, don't we just reconsider every later event?
No, that's exactly the trap. According to the textbook, when financial statements are reissued, you generally do not recognize events that occurred between the original issuance date and the reissuance date, unless another GAAP or regulatory requirement specifically requires an adjustment.
Interesting. So, reissuing doesn't create a brand new subsequent event evaluation window.
Correct. Think of it as reopening the document for a specific reason, not restarting history.
Then the textbook also mentions revised financial statements. How are those different?
Revised financial statements are considered reissued financial statements. The important takeaway for this module is simply recognizing that relationship. Don't invent extra accounting that the textbook doesn't discuss.
Let's walk through the Becker example because it ties everything together. There are 4 events after year-end. First, a lawsuit settles.
Recognized. The lawsuit existed before year-end. Settlement gives better evidence of the obligation. Adjust the financial statements.
Second, the company buys another business.
Non-recognized. New condition. Disclose if material. No adjustment.
Third, a customer with a significant receivable files bankruptcy shortly after year-end.
Recognized. The bankruptcy provides evidence that collectibility problems already existed. Adjust the receivable if appropriate.
Fourth, a customer with overdue invoices simply disappears after year-end.
The textbook explains this one carefully. If the receivable was already past due but there wasn't evidence at year-end that collection was doubtful, merely disappearing afterward does not necessarily prove the account was impaired at year-end. Whether adjustment is needed depends on whether the later event provides evidence about the existing condition. If not, disclosure may be appropriate if material.
Notice how every single answer came back to the same question. Not what happened, not how big it was, but what it tells us about December 31st.
Exactly. That's why memorizing lists isn't enough. You need the decision process.
Let's make that decision tree even simpler. Question 1. Did the condition exist on the balance sheet date?
If yes, you're thinking recognized subsequent event. Ask whether the later event gives better evidence about that existing condition. If it does, adjust.
Question 2. Did the condition arise after the balance sheet date?
Then you're thinking non-recognized subsequent event. No adjustment. Consider disclosure if material.
I think students sometimes overcomplicate this because they believe accounting always rewards memorization. This module actually rewards reasoning.
It really does. You can often answer questions you've never seen before simply by asking whether the later event explains the past or creates the future.
Here's another analogy. Imagine taking a photograph on New Year's Eve. A recognized subsequent event is discovering your camera lens was slightly blurry, and now finding a sharper version of the same picture. The scene didn't change. Your understanding improved.
I like that. And a non-recognized event is somebody walking into the room after the picture was taken. Interesting. Potentially important. But they weren't in the original photograph.
Exactly. The picture shouldn't suddenly include people who weren't there.
One last warning. The FAR exam loves situations that feel emotional. Factories burn down, major acquisitions happen, customers fail, large lawsuits settle. Don't let the drama distract you from the accounting. Stay disciplined. Ask the one question. Did this provide evidence about conditions existing on the balance sheet date?
If yes, recognize it. If no, think disclosure.
Then remember the reporting window. SEC filers evaluate through the date the financial statements are issued. Other entities evaluate through the date they're available to be issued.
That's really the whole module. One mental model, a handful of classic examples, one cutoff date.
And once that framework clicks, the individual examples stop feeling like isolated rules. They all become applications of the same idea. The financial statements are telling the truth about the balance sheet date. Subsequent events only matter because they either improve that story or begin a new one.
And if you remember that distinction during the exam, you'll spend a lot less time trying to memorize lists and a lot more time simply thinking like an accountant.
Exactly. That's the goal.